Welcome everyone to the Revolution in the 21st Century Convention. We are here with our next session, What's Next for Social Movements? I'm joined by Alice Gatto from Portugal, a member of the Climaximo movement, a co-founder of the End Fossil Occupy movement, and a very cool activist who's going to help talk to us today about what's next for social movements, really championing one book in particular, All In, which Sinan and Mariana have worked on from Climaximo in Portugal. And that's very exciting. We will also hopefully be joined by Kofi Malawi Klu, one of the founders of the Internationalist Solidarity Network, who is currently in Ghana doing international solidarity work. I think technically Ghana is not allowed on this list for Zoom events for some bizarre reason. If anyone from Zoom events is watching this recording back, please allow more countries to join these events in future. So fingers crossed he will be making his way in. If not, the floor is with Alice and I for this session. So Alice, we would love to hear a little bit about yourself and the book and what you think is coming up for social movements over the next few years, or your vision going forward.
Hi. Well, first, thanks for the invitation, and I'm sorry I cannot see everyone else, but it's really nice to be here. So Robin already introduced me a bit, but just from my end, I joined the climate justice movement in 2018, so right before Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion popped up. And I joined Climaximo, which is an anti-capitalist climate justice direct action group based here in Lisbon in Portugal. Over the years until now, I've accompanied all the ups and downs of the movement, all the exciting stuff of Extinction Rebellion, Fridays for Future, and also the weird, bizarre part where we are right now, where no one knows exactly how to move forwards and to get that energy back on. And I've also learned a lot from those past experiences. And I think that what I'm focusing more right now is if we manage, first of all, how do we manage to get that energy back, and how do we manage to get millions of people on the street again? But also, how do we make sure that on that movement, it's actually a revolutionary movement that allows us to do the necessary change by 2030? Because it needs to be anchored on those revolutionary aims. And I'm also very interested in international coordination work, which I think is one of the key answers to this that I want to talk about. Robin already introduced the All In book. So All In, which I actually have right here, it's a book that was written by Mariana Rodrigues and Sinan Eden, which are two amazing comrades from Portugal, which it's called All In, a Revolutionary Theory to Stop Climate Collapse. And right now, I think that this is what we need in the movement, a revolutionary theory to stop climate collapse. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, not in the sense of promoting it, but in the sense that, as you will see, this is a very practical guide, and this is the content I want to focus on. So first of all, where did this come from? And I was talking before about this problem that we have in our movement and this way, and this need for rebuilding it. And for the re-anchoring that needs to happen in our movement, and actually for the movement to kick on again, I think that there are two very complex sets of information that we need to take into account. And what I see a lot from all the international work that I'm doing, but also not just with the climate movement, but also talking with groups that come from housing movement, feminist movement, and so on, is that there is a complete disconnection between two crucial things. So one of them is urgency and the climate crisis and climate emergency, which tells us that we need basically to change everything by 2030 if we want to avoid climate collapse. So there is this question of deadlines, which brings in a lot of anxiety. How the fuck are we going to do this? And I think that there are a lot of groups that are true inspiration on how we can be anchored in that urgency. Well, Climacium is one of them, but also all the groups from Day 22, Extinction Rebellion, and so on. But then there's another set of information, which we are usually not crossing together, is that the climate crisis is a structural problem, and that there's no way that we can meet those deadlines for when the transformation needs to happen and how fast if we don't look at system change. So there is a system, let's call it capitalism, that is the driving force behind climate collapse and social collapse in general. And for us to be able to solve the climate crisis, which has a deadline to be solved, we also need to dismantle the system. And a lot of times there are also other groups that are just looking at this part of system change at large and just focusing on anti-capitalism. Because changing the system, regardless of what deadline, is also a very frightening and complex task. And how do we merge this together? I think it's the answer that we need to move forward. So basically, we need an adequate theory of change that can give us a way to look at this problem and actually executing the necessary change. The task being dismantle capitalism by 2030, and a model that tells us how is this supposed to happen, with which theory of change, and what is the mechanism through which we can make that happen. So basically, what is the organizational model that is adequate for this task at hand? And this is a simple, big question that All-in tries to answer. And how does All-in do it? And sorry if I speak for too long. I was thinking of telling what I wanted to say and then open for, but if you want to interrupt me, that's also fine.
No, please, Alice. I'm fascinated. And just so you know, people in the chat are also loving this. I've just enabled the reactions on Zoom, everyone. So if you want to give Alice some love, put some, do some celebration. Yeah, there you go. A couple of hearts coming in. Fantastic. And please carry on, Alice, and then we'll have some questions from people later on. So go ahead.
Yeah, all right. So what is this book? So just to give you a simple overview, and I'm not going to go into detail about what's in the book because it's 150 pages, which is not that long. So it's an easy read at the same time, but not for this call in particular. So basically 1/3 of the book is just this diagnosis of where we are, what's happening, what's going on. Then on another third of the book, you have the main arguments that we are making. And there's also a lot of reference to literature, and the main proposals that we are doing is in the middle of the book. And the last third is what to do. So a to-do list of how we can get out of this mess. And I'm also going to explain what we mean by this, because I'm not going to just say an amazing, fascinating answer that no one has ever thought about before. But what I mean about this, what to do. So the book is organized into 6 propositions. The first 2 are that we have a global issue at hand. And it's very unfortunate that also the co-speaker isn't able to be here speaking about that. And this means that there is a global way that we need to address this. And the second proposition is that this is a class business, which is something that the climate movement doesn't seem to refer to a lot. But what we mean is that there is a class struggle to resolve. And the way to address what we need to address is through class struggle. And the rest of the propositions are basically responding to complexity with complexity. So when you look at global stuff, class stuff, deadlines, system change, it's very heavy, and it's a lot to ask from any one of us. And typically, when we look at this kind of change, we say, okay, this is going to be very too complex. And we say this in a defensive term. And what this book is also trying to do is, okay, but so what are the tools that we need for the level of complexity that we have at hand? Let's not ignore that it's complex, and let's not say it's easy, but what we need to get. And I'm not going to run through all the book propositions, obviously, especially because I can tell you later how you can read the book yourself. But I think that for this particular space, and also, knowing a bit of the work of Rev 21, I wanted to bring three different things that are on the book, and it's also a challenge for, to maybe carry out throughout the convention. The first thing I wanted to say is, even before we go into the propositions and what to do, it's about how we look at history. So there is an argument of the book under the section of movements and currents, which is basically how are we looking at the past experiences, and how do we see ourselves when we say that we are a revolutionary movement? What are we building under? So what are the steps that we are also carrying? And this also refers a bit back to class struggle as well. So I think that All-In provides a different reading of the mainstream revolutionary interpretation and examples that you see in the movement. And what I'm saying is that All-In is not looking at only, I mean, it also is, but it's not focusing mainly on Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the suffragists, which are the core examples that you hear in the climate movement currently. And I'm not saying that these aren't great examples and a lot to learn from. I'm just saying that there are a lot of things that I believe that we are ignoring. And the All-In book brings in independence struggle in Africa. It brings in guerrilla movements in Latin America. It brings in the Bolshevik Revolution. And not in the sense of, okay, here is the model that we need to copy, but in the sense of there are all of these models. And when we are just looking at one of them, we are ignoring a very big, important part of history, and we are limiting what we can do. And we need to look at this, and we need to acknowledge this history to learn what worked, what didn't work, what can work in different contexts. And I'm not going to explain all of this into detail because actually me and Sina, which is one of the co-authors of the book, are going to do a session for the Resilient Uprising program, which you may know, on the June 8th, about this, just about this, all these past experiences, what we can learn from this. So I will leave this part for now. And then there are the two other propositions I wanted to talk about. And I think that the biggest one, maybe the first one I want to bring, not the biggest one, it's that we need to build a movement for rupture. So this is to circle back to what I was saying about this, how can we hold at the same time the two sets of information about climate deadlines, anti-capitalism, system change. And I believe that the lack of honesty that in the movement we are having with ourselves, but that we are also having with with the rest of people, is causing a lot of frustration and despair. Because 2019, you had millions of people in the streets demanding carbon neutrality by 2030. And people sat down, people got arrested, people were beaten. And you do fast forward to 2025 and everything is fucked. And I believe that this may be one of the reasons, I'm not saying it's the only one, that maybe some people that I looked at before that were very active and were very hopeful currently think everything is lost and everything is doomed. And this is one thing we need to resolve. And for us to resolve this, we cannot keep saying to the governments, we cannot keep saying, please sit down with us to demand to the governments the end to fossil fuels by 2030. Because there is an analysis that we need to do, which is the climate crisis is a premeditated and coordinated act of violence by governments and companies towards the people and society. They know exactly what they are doing. They have been doing it for decades. This is not some kind of they aren't able to adapt or we just need to press them hard enough. This is a conscious choice, and it's the only way to keep the system running. Because we know that achieving the end to fossil fuels by 2030 in the global north is completely incompatible with capitalism. Maybe back in the 70s, it could be. Right now, it's impossible. And Andreas Malm talks about it in Overshoot. So I'm also not going to go into that in that depth. But one way that Climassimo started to do this, and this is something a helpful tool internally for our organizers and something that we wanted society to step into accepting, is that governments and companies have declared war against society and the planet. And this is not a slogan. And this is not a metaphor. This brings very strategical consequences with it, because it means that if they have declared this war, if they know what they are doing, then asking them to please stop and please give up your weapons would be as pointless as asking the Portuguese dictator for please give us more freedom. They know what they are doing, and we need to accept that. And we need to accept that the only way that we are going to be able to achieve this system change by 2030 is through a ruptural model of transformation. It's not a question about the right government in place. It's not a question about the right director of the United Nations. It's not a question of reforming NATO. It's a question that all of them are building the capitalist system, which by itself is incompatible. And the only way that in 5 years we can overthrow the capitalist system is through a ruptural approach, because we don't have time for other approaches. And this is something that the book talks about as well. And we can develop that later on, but just so I don't ramble for a lot of time, just wanted to say the last proposition I wanted to talk to you about, which is global stuff, which is very frustrating, global coordination. And I know this because I've done several of international coordination attempts that have not worked. So I was in the By 20 We Rise Up platform back in 2020, which was a coordination of direct action groups of the climate justice movement in Europe. Then Climassimo was one of the groups that launched the Glasgow Agreement. And okay, I will wrap up very fast because I want to give the word to Coffee. So basically what I want to say is that for us to be able to address system change, we need international coordination. Not international coordination and cooperation between any group. We need to make sure that we are aligned on our goal of achieving the system change by 2030 and that we are working with ruptural organizations. But we do need to have a way of looking where is no one looking in the movement at, what is missing, and to work together with people that maybe we think are doing a very stupid thing. But for us to be able to say what's next for the movement, it's not enough for me in Portugal to say, okay, I'm going to launch this campaign and then it's going to happen everywhere. There is a bigger analysis that needs to be done, which is what can work in a particular context, how can we merge our strengths and weaknesses, and there needs to be mandate for international decision making, because we need to think at the global level, and then we can apply what makes sense at a national level. And this will require a lot of resources and a lot of flexibility and a lot of time. But this is how the book says that we need to move forward. So what we are looking right now is for people that want to go all in, organizers that want to go all in, and let's talk about what's missing in our movement and, well, make a plan of how to get up out of this mess. And yeah, I'm going to shut up.
Alice, thank you so much. That was fucking awesome. People are going crazy in the chat right now, sending you all the love and hearts. Whoa, my screen is just full of hearts. And it's so fantastic to see Kofi has been able to join as well. We've got 140 people joining in live right now for this presentation. It's so exciting. We've got Alice Gatto presenting the All In book. It's a lovely opening presentation on it. If you want to ask questions to Alice and to anyone else today, you can use the Q&A function or the chat, or put up your hand for a future comment. That being said, I want to introduce the wonderful Kofi Malawi Clue, who is calling in from Ghana today to help talk to us about internationalist solidarity and the work we can do for our social movements to grow internationalist solidarity. Kofi has co-founded the Internationalist Solidarity Extinction Rebellion Group, the Being the Change Extinction Rebellion Group, and has been a hell of a force and a mentor in this movement. So Kofi, I want to pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. You said enough. It's just that it's important to know that I come from the Pan-African liberation movement, into the wider global justice movement, and particularly into the environmental justice, part of that global justice movement. And therefore, my perspective on, everything is shaped by my African experience, both, on the continent of Africa, particularly, Ghana, where I'm back on a steady visit, right now. But also the diaspora, I've spent, many, years in the outside of Africa and worked, in the diasporan communities, particularly in Europe. So it is my contribution be shaped by the perspectives, that these experiences, have given me. And I'm really, really glad that Extinction Rebellion, the original Extinction Rebellion with Robin, Roger, Gail, and that awesome, founding, team initiating it has been an incredible opportunity for me to take my own learning further, to develop ways of working and ways of, relationship building, that have enriched, my overall experience. And so, yeah, in terms of what next for our social movements, particularly exploring issues of decolonization and degrowth. The one thing that I want to emphasize is that my entire experience within within various movements, particularly the environmental justice movement in its various formations, right? I first encountered Reclaim the Streets, then Climate Camp, and then Extinction Rebellion. And the one thing that, and before that, I've been active with a number of NGOs, the World Development Movement that is now the Global Justice Now, worked in Jubilee 2000, that's, Christian Aid, Oxfam, and a number of, international development NGOs helped to create. And then also political movements, even though never was a member of the Labour Party, I had close working relations with, the left of the Labour Party, including Jeremy Corbyn, Tony Benn, and others over the years. The one thing that is very clear to me, and to me now we need to really, really recognize is that so long as the global capitalism and the forces that run it, find in Africa and the so-called, third world or underdeveloped world, our majority world, the place from which to extract literally for nothing, all kinds of resources, to impose puppet governments that brutalize, the population and keep it in ignorance, and literally subject our peoples to genocide and ecocide, and find it profitable to do so. They have immense power that, the movement for change, the movements for change, the forces for change in the developed capitalist world will find almost impossible, on their own, to get to effect change, right? And that means that it's important for those of us who are working in the developed capitalist countries to recognize we need the majority world. We need Africa, we need Asia, we need, south of Abiyala or the Americas, South America. We need the peoples, the progressive forces of those places, to build the force, the global force capable of obstructing, first and foremost, the business as usual of the extractivist business as usual of global capitalism. And then to be able to cut off, the appendages that are in the peripheral areas, of the metropolis, which is our parts of the world, and thereby weaken global capitalism for those in the developed capitalist countries to be able to finish it off. Unless this is, recognized as the decolonization task, not just for, people who have experienced, colonization and its ongoing coloniality, but also those in the developed, capitalist countries who, whether they like it or not, are drawn into coloniality because it is from the colonies that the extraction of wealth and resources, enables global to build a global power to be able to dominate both in the global south as well as in the global north, right? So decolonization is not just a task for the indigenous nations and their communities in the colonial domains of global capitalism. It is a task that people have to embrace, progressive forces in the developed capitalist countries have to embrace. So let's get clear. And until we have clarity and are working seriously towards that, not much is going to happen, because we've seen the extent to which the forces that are interested in maintaining the current order, the fossil fuel extraction, are able to even change the legal goalposts, trample down upon democracy, sabotage, the so-called rule of law, and actually are able to take away rights that for centuries have been fought for and won, even in the developed capitalist countries, and to be able to undermine the democratic gains of all of us in order to continue maintaining the current system, okay? And that is why we have, our brave, activists, in prison, right? And the extent to which they've had to bend back even the existing legal parameters, in order to be able to, for example, the what they've been doing with the juries and so on and so forth, right? All of this, means that the power of global capital is still as strong as ever before, and we need to develop a global strategy and tactics of battling for power in order to undo that power and replace it with the unifying power of our peoples of the world, both the global south and the global north. This is precisely the way forward for social movements that need to begin, to recognize each other in the global south and the global north, to be able to build the kind of links that we in the Extinction Rebellion International Solidarity Network and the XRB, the Change Affinity Network, have been trying, to develop, whereby progressive forces in the global north get to know who are actually working within our communities of resistance at the grassroots, and are able to, first of all, share knowledge, share experiences far more directly, not mediated by NGOs, not mediated by government officials, not mediated by academics, but, ordinary fighting forces of both the global south and the global north get to know each other in the terrains of resistance, right? And work through the knowledge that is necessary and the practical organizational forms, that will enable us to build to become the global force capable of, effecting, peaceful but revolutionary change. And that is what must be emphasized. Reform is no longer possible, right? We can, to borrow a phrase from somewhere, we can, have a revolutionary use of steps of reform, but reform for reform's sake, and believing that, we can make capitalism evolve into forms that will do away with, its extractivist predation, let's forget it, right? Mm-hmm. So discussing truly revolutionary ways of peacefully making change, right? And how we connect not just our organizations, but connect communities of resistance, to be able to, educate each other. And that is also something that is absolutely important. Nobody knows it all, right? And there is a lot we have all to unlearn in order to properly learn. And that means everybody has something to teach, everybody has something to learn, right? One of the major obstacles we encountered in Extinction Rebellion and a number of, movements in the global north is the assumption that they know it all and they have nothing to learn, particularly for those of us from the global south, right? Those of us even living in the global north within our global south diasporan communities. There is a section, of movements in the global north that think that they have nothing to learn from us. Now, we do not approach our own communities in the global south, let alone communities in the global north, to say that we have nothing to learn. There is a lot that we all have to unlearn, particularly when it comes to decolonization and degrowth. There's a lot we have, to unlearn, and there's a lot we have to work with each other in humility, supporting each other to learn together properly. And that is one of the challenges we face. And of course, in that, it is important to make visible the voices of resistance in the global north, to make those voices resound loudly within our global south communities of resistance. There is an assumption that once you are on social media, right, you have people hearing you. That is not the case, right? You come down, I'm currently in Ghana, and social media has some influence, but a very limited influence on the vast majority of of our people. Right. So, if things are not taken from social media down, actually by word of mouth, in practical action, into our communities, they are drowned by the voices of your governments and corporations. What is heard very, very much louder than any voices of dissent, than any voices seeking change in the global north, are the voices of your corporations, that are backed by the voices of your governments, right? And, educational institutions, okay? So there's a lot of work we have to do, to make people in the global south, the vast majority of ordinary people in the global, know that there is resistance against, corporate domination, against extractivism, against the business as usual, of global capitalism. There is resistance in the global north itself, right? Because that is not what is known. So, these are the challenges. And if we are able, for example, the issues around, degrowth, right now, the degrowth is still a concept that is not widely, in public conversation in the global south, right? Many, forces, anti-imperialist forces still are yet to take the degrowth message down to the grassroots of our communities to become issues of public discourse. These are some of the things that we can do. So I challenge some of my friends, some of my good friends, like Jason Hickel, right? Who write beautifully about, degrowth, right? And who wax lyrical in lecture rooms, academic institutions about it. Come down into the grassroots of our community because they don't know you, right? You can publish all the books you want. You can be talk of academia, in the global north, with the grassroots which matters in the global don't know you, right? And it will make a world of a difference if you come down into the grassroots of our communities, and engage directly in conversation with the forces that have a vested interest in degrowth. Because their everyday lives, are such that when the arguments of degrowth are meaningful to them, it's not an academic exercise to convince people, of these classes of people about degrowth. The message is clear. They live the reality, the genocide and ecocide of growth. That is the reality they live. So degrowth makes sense to them. But if you are not talking to them, if they don't know you, if they can't reach out to you, if they cannot bring the arguments you academically make, into, defending themselves and offering their alternatives against their governments, against foreign governments, against foreign corporations, if you are not being quoted by them to back their arguments and to back their actual practical struggles, then all that you're doing is not effective, right? That is the challenge that we face. So I think I'll leave it here, highlighting the point that yes, decolonization should be the immediate task facing all of us, both progressive forces in the global, south and the global north. That we need to build particularly relations of education, to learn from each other and to unlearn, things that are hampering our solidarity, so that we can be an effective unified global force, to effect peaceful change. And then we need to bring, the progressive voices in the global south in the global north, down into the grassroots of our communities of resistance in the global south, so that there can be clarity on the fact that, there are forces out there in the global north who share a common vision and share a common purpose with our progressive forces in the global south that want a new world that we are capable of, winning right now if we are able to grasp the educational work and the practicalities of building true international solidarity. I'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Kofi, my friend, thank you so much for bringing that. You're getting a lot of love in the chat on the live stream right now. So much support for what you just said, my friend. We really need to embrace the people power theory across the whole world. To say people power doesn't just mean it's the, people in one country. It's the global majority, as you say, rising up together that we need to focus on. And so I'm really glad that we're just starting now with this convention to try and reach a more global audience and to bring people together, to hopefully make those connections in a word that I love that you use, which is glocal. Bringing the global to the local. We're organizing assemblies in our community, and we're talking about things at a global scale. Now, for everyone that's tuning in, you might be aware of the time. We have 2 other sessions starting next. One is with the economists on what's next in our collapsed societies. The other is with scientists on their other book, Scientists for Survival. And so if you do want to hop into those straight away and not miss a single bite, please feel free to go back into the lobby. But for those who want to just hear the ending to this session, I'd love to pass it back to Alice and then to Kofi again for some final words on how this all connects together with All In, with our strategy going forward. Yeah, Alice, please, any comments would be lovely.
Yeah, thanks, Kofi. It was great hearing you. So I'm not going to give more theoretical or strategical information. I just wanted to wrap up on kind of next steps if you are interested. And I think that's something that I maybe missed before, and also was thinking about this when hearing to Kofi, is that so All In is not an intellectual book. So this is not a book for, like academia or intellectual curiosity. It is a tool for organizing. And the main, so it's basically the way that we found to reach a wider audience to say, what are the things that, the different things I said before and plenty of others that I didn't say and are in the book. What I wanted to end by saying is that when you reach the end of the book, you are not going to find this model of, now we are going to setting up this campaign. Please join this specific campaign in your own country. This is how you can do it, and so on. It's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. So the idea is the to-do list that exists on how to move forward is how to do that thought on an international movement level that I was talking about in the beginning. So how to, basically how to put everything on the table and also giving us categories to think and to talk between each other. And the real work of the book starts when it's finished. So what we have, so we are currently doing several book presentations to get to more people. And also if you want to organize one in your country, online or in person, we are completely available for that. And we are also doing workshops in person in different countries. We have done 2. And this is not something where we go and say and do a lecture. It's actually how to apply tools, the tools that are in the book and that are useful for each context. And we are changing the program according to the needs and so on. And we are not there as experts, but just what happens if we follow this movement mapping and think on these terms and so on. And it's been very interesting, and the feedback has been great. But again, the end goal is to do this at an international level. So please visit the All In website, which I've already left on the chat, but I can do it again if you didn't see. And there are plenty of there are plenty of articles as well on how to apply and how to think about past movements, what we can learn from them, because this is something that is very, very important, on reflecting on our own failures and why did we fail, and how to avoid those mistakes, and to have this movement learning process happening together and not just on internal closed meetings. And then you have also our contacts to reach out to and to think what else if you want to go all in and build a ruptural international movement.
Wow, Alice, I love it. Alice Gatto, everyone, calling in from Portugal, the all-in movement. I love it. It's like, this is really what's needed to bring together Alice and Kofi in a revolutionary mindset and say, international solidarity, we need to go all in. We need to make it happen. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and bringing some love. Kofi, I want to give you the chance to say a closing word, maybe also if you want to say how people can get involved or a closing thought, you'd be very welcome.
Well, in closing, I cannot devote my concluding words to what we must do to set the political prisoners in Britain, free, right? And that is a simple thing. Up till now, across the world, it is not known that Britain has political prisoners. Britain has arbitrarily, dismantled, a lot of the gains of democratic struggle, in order to railroad to prison, all those whose only supposed crime is to stand up for environmental justice, stand up to try to disrupt, extractivist plunder and the genocide and ecocide that is resulting from that across the world. Now, this is not much, widely known as it should be. I'm here in Ghana and hardly anybody, has heard of these names. So what we are doing right now, with my colleagues, in terms of taking local international solidarity action further, is we want to popularize the images of those who are being held, as political prisoners in Britain, right here in Africa, beginning from Ghana. We want everybody in this country to know that contrary to the propaganda of the British government and state institutions, Britain now has political prisoners whose only, supposedly crime is that they stood up to try to stop crimes of ecocide, okay? And that is something that, we must all work together to achieve. And I believe that when school children, when people, popular artists, when academics all know that Britain now has political prisoners whose only crime is standing to try and stop, ecocide from engulfing the world, to stop us from losing the planet, I think that is where, things will really, really begin to change. So that is a practical task that the globalization of international solidarity must enable us to achieve. And if, we get out of prison, this, new breed of freedom fighters, planet repairs freedom fighters, I think that the prestige, the reputation of the movement from the ground, will grow much, much, much higher across the world. So that is a practical task, confronting us, upon which I would like to call everybody to work with us, in order to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kofi. We're so with you. The prisoners, some of them who have just come out actually this last week and who are joining on the convention today. I really think, as you say, this having peaceful political prisoners is a moral disgrace. And it's a real litmus test of a society, a test of a society to have those and to see how people react. And so it's brilliant that you're raising the awareness across the world of that. And I also wanted to say it's on your point about, getting into the grassroots community, not just being an academic behind a book, but getting involved. Alice and the All In team, Mariana, Sinan, they're really doing that. They're going to be doing a global tour. And I'm really excited to connect you two afterwards. And let's get all in Ghana in a grassroots session, in a community. I can see it happening already. I think it's going to be brilliant. And that's why this convention is happening, to bring together these revolutionary minds and ideas. Thank you so much, both of you, for all your time, and for everyone else for tuning in and sending all the heart emojis and everything else across the session. It's so welcome. 2 new other sessions happening now with Collapse Futures and Economics with Ann Pettifor, Steve Keen, and Julia Steinberger, fantastic economist and Palestine activist. Or if you want to get involved in more of a workshop and a group discussion, there is the Scientists on Survival, also talking about their personal stories as standing up as scientists and taking civil disobedience. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic day. I'll see you in the next sessions. Kofi and Alice, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.